Do you lately also have these dreams about a Birdman with knives for fingers and some kid singing that Freddy is coming for you? No? Then I might have a serious problem. Hello everyone, welcome back to another horror franchise ranking by J. Mara. And this month is October, and I really love October because October is spooky season. This month is all about horror, and as a horror lover, I really love that. People are watching horror movies more this month. Well, I'm basically watching horror the whole year, but I'm certainly watching more horror this month. And seeing it's spooky season, I really want to do some horror themed videos this month. And I have some ideas that I want to accomplish. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do every idea, but I'm gonna do most of them. I'm gonna try at least. But what I'm definitely gonna do this month is to give you my personal ranking of the horror franchises of our big three slasher icons. And that being Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger. And we're gonna kick off with Freddy Krueger. Yes, this is a ranking video of all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies with Freddy Krueger, and Freddy is definitely a horror icon. Even if you don't watch horror, you probably know who Freddy Krueger is, because he is the burn guy, he's the guy with the knives for fingers. That is Freddy Krueger. I think everyone know who this guy is, and he is played perfectly by Robert Englund for 8 movies. And in this, so I'm gonna start with giving my ranking of all the 9 A Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So let's start with it. And at number 9, no surprise here I think, that is the movie that was almost literally the end of this franchise. This movie really was, like the title it said, Freddy's Dead. This is A Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead, or The Final Nightmare. Yeah, right. Anyhow, I really don't like this movie. I really despise it actually. This is a bad movie and it's just terrible. The dream sequences are really lame. The whole movie is so cartoonish. The characters are forgettable. I don't even remember the characters. Maybe that's a good thing. Even they made Freddy a joke. This movie is just embarrassing, and I really struggled to get to the end of this film because that was a really bad movie. And actually, I don't want to talk about this movie. It's a bad movie, and every time I do a marathon of these movies, this is the only one I don't rewatch. Yeah, it's that bad. Anyhow, let's get to number 8. At number 8 we have The Dream Master. That's A Nightmare on Elm Street 4. And this is actually an okay movie. This is really in slasher territory, but it's nothing special for me. It's a bit boring actually, and it has some problems. I didn't like what they did with certain characters in that first 30 minutes of the movie. The new characters are not interesting. Didn't really care for the dream sequences. I really don't like the story of this film or what they were going for with the final girl. Didn't work for me. The only thing that actually saved this movie for me was Freddy himself. You really can tell that Robert Englund did his very best in this fourth movie, because Freddy is actually amazing in this one. It's more the comedy Freddy now, but in this movie it actually works. So that was actually still amazing, but in general, this fourth movie is not really a movie that I liked rewatching. Just above that, at number 7, we have the 5th movie, and that's The Dream Child. This movie basically have the same problems that 4 had, but kinda switched. Like, I didn't really like Freddy in this movie. I think it's not the best Freddy Krueger, but I like the characters more. They are slightly more interesting than the characters in the fourth movie. But what really made me decide to put number 5 above number 5, above number 4, apologies, is because I really like the style and the vibe of this movie. For instance, that motorcycle dream scene early in the movie, I believe, that was actually a very cool looking scene, and there are certain cool looking scenes in this movie that made me like it a bit more. But actually, the chapter 4, 5 and 6, for me these are really unnecessary sequels. They don't add anything to the story or to the character or even the folklore in general. So yeah, one really terrible movie and then just two okay ones. At number 6 we have another favorite pick for the last position by many of you, and that's the remake. For me it's at number 6 because I actually still like the remake. It's not perfect, but I am more positive than negative on the remake. And actually, this was actually the first A Nightmare on Elm Street film I saw. I believe I was 13 years old or something, and I was actually very into this movie, and this was my introduction to Freddy Krueger, and I actually liked the movie. And this is the only movie so far that Robert Englund is not playing Freddy. In this movie we have Jackie Earle Haley, and in my opinion I actually think he did an amazing job. He is also a different version of Freddy Krueger, but I really liked him as Freddy Krueger. And Freddy Krueger is scary again in this movie, a bit darker, maybe a bit too dark. Like, I really like the direction and the ideas this remake has for the story as for the character, but I think they pushed it a bit too far in the final 30 minutes. They made Freddy a bit too dark for my tastes. Also, not the best Nancy in this movie. I actually preferred Chris in this movie, played by Katie Cassidy. She actually should have been the main character of this film, because Chris is a better character than Nancy for this movie. But all in all, I still think it's a decent enough remake. I can have my joy with it, certainly for the scare factor. So a good remake to watch like every 7 years or so. So the next 5, so the top 5, are actually the nightmare movies I absolutely like. These are the franchise best movies. And at number 5, maybe a little shocker, but I have The Dream Warriors. And that's the third chapter in the franchise. And it's a little shocker because I usually see this movie at the top of the ranking or second place. So it's a big fan favorite actually. And I get it, because this movie is actually very cool. It's an amazing movie. It's basically Inception before there was an Inception, or Inception with a horror touch. Because the whole premise, which is actually very cool, is about these young kids, teenagers, tormented by Freddy, but they decide to work together and to go in each other's dreams to fight back against Freddy. That's actually an amazing premise, and it's executed perfectly, so it's an amazing movie. But this is the first movie they introduced the comedy. The comedy did not always land it for me, and not always a fan of certain dream sequences. But other than that, I have no problems with this movie. I agree that this is an amazing Nightmare on Elm Street movie. But for me it comes at number 5. Still great, but I like the 4 others just a bit more than this one. So at number 4, we have actually a cool movie. It's Freddy vs. Jason. Yes, the crossover between two iconic slasher villains. And it's certainly Freddy's movie. It's the final movie that Robert Englund played the character, and he did a very well job, because this is actually one of my favorite Freddys in this movie. I think he was very awesome in this movie. It's not a great movie, but what did you expect with the title Freddy vs. Jason? It's exactly what we wanted from a movie called Freddy vs. Jason. It's a cool movie, really liked the story. It was very nice how they brought the two characters together. Even the teenage characters were cool, especially the character that was played by Catherine Isabel. So I really like this movie. It's a cool movie and I rewatch this quite often. Going to number 3, and that is actually a nightmare movie that by the first watch I didn't like at all, but now I really do, and that is A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. This is, yeah, it's a different kind of movie. It's not your typical Nightmare on Elm Street movie, I believe, but usually I like the different ones, not the typical ones. And it's a whole fresh idea actually, maybe a bit ahead of its time, but in this movie we have a final boy, Jesse, an amazing character actually, and he moves into the house on Elm Street, the house that belonged to Nancy in the first movie, a few years later, and he gets haunted by Freddy's ghost or demon spirit, and Freddy basically wants Jesse's body to kill teenagers again. Interesting premise, and by a rewatch I actually like the movie. It's a very cool nightmare movie now actually, and because I really liked the new idea, the new approach of the story and the characters, so that's why it's number 3 for me. And then number 2, we actually have another nightmare movie that had a fresh idea, and that is New Nightmare. And this is directed by Wes Craven. He came back to the franchise after that miserable thing called Freddy's Dead. Anyhow, New Nightmare is actually a kind of prototype or a tryout-ish for Scream. Because New Nightmare was not a success when it came out, but Scream was. But New Nightmare did the whole meta aspect basically before Scream, which is also directed by Wes Craven, my favorite horror director. And New Nightmare is actually amazing because of the premise, what if Freddy was real? And in this movie, Heather Langenkamp, Raz and Robert play themselves, and they are getting tormented by a demon who took the form of Freddy Krueger. Interesting idea, and the movie is actually a very cool movie to watch. It does not really has a lot of kills, but what it lacks in kills, it makes up for great atmosphere, great folklore, great sets. It's a very qualitative Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and I really like this movie. Every time I watch it, I find new love for the movie, so deservedly at number 2. But obviously, the best Nightmare on Elm Street movie is the original, also directed by Wes Craven. This is absolutely Wes Craven's vision. Well, except for maybe the last 2 minutes, because the movie has a terrible ending, but other than that, it's a perfect horror classic actually. We got introduced by one of the great final girls with Nancy, one of the great slasher icons with Freddy Krueger, and you really can tell that Robert Englund plays this role like it is for him made. And the dream sequences are amazing. We even have a young Johnny Depp, who is actually a very funny character in this movie, and it's just an amazing horror movie. It's a horror classic for a reason, so that's why it's my number 1. So this was my ranking of all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I hope you enjoyed my ranking. Always be free to give your own personal ranking in the comments. Would love to read those. And if you want to see more horror franchise rankings from me in the future, always be welcome to subscribe to my channel. So I wish you all sweet dreams, and till the next time.